जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रव्रजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सत अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांता स्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन फाउंडर आचार्य बीबीटी फाउंडर आचार्य श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रव्रजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सत श्री श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदी हरि हरि बोल। All glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 1, Questions by Vidura. And today we will read text 3, which has a small purport, so we'll do text 4 also. We have 3 on the board. Can you put 4 on the board? Because that one has a purport. Okay, so I will read 3 by myself and then we can do 4 together. Rajo vacha kutra shatur bhagavata maitrena sasangama kadava saha samvada etad varnayana prabho. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. The king asked Sukdev Goswami, where and when did the meeting and discussion take place between Saint Vidura and His Grace Maitreya Muni? Kindly oblige, my lord, and describe this to us. So it has like a couple of lines to this purport. Exactly as Shonaka Rishi inquired of Suta Goswami, and Suta Goswami replied, so Srila Sukdev Goswami replied to King Parikshit's inquiries. The king was very anxious to understand the meaningful discussion that took place between the two great souls. Text 4. Nahi alparthodayastasya vidurasya malatmana tasmin variyasi prasanna sadhu vadopabramhita nahi alparthodayastasya vidurasya malatmana tasmin variyasi prasanna sadhu vadopabramhita nahi alparthodayastasya vidurasya malatmana tasmin variyasi prasanna sadhu vadopabramhita. Please chant. nahi alpartodayastasya vidurasyamalatmana tasmin variyasi prasana sadhu vadopabramhita nahi alpartodayastasya vidurasyamalatmana tasmin variyasi prasana sadhu vadopabramhita nahi alpartodayastasya sadhuvadopabramhita. Mataji's, please. Nahi alpartodayastasya vidurasyamalatmana tasmin variyasi prasna sadhuvadopabramhita nahi alpartodayastasya vidurasyamalatmana tasmin variyasi prasna sadhuvadopabramhita. Synonyms: na, never; he, certainly; alpa artha, small, unimportant purpose; udaya, raised; tasya, his; vidurasya, of vidura; amal atmana, of the saintly man; tasmin, in that; variyasi, highly purposeful; prasanna, questions; sadhuvad, things approved by saints and sages; upabramhita, full with. Translation: Saint Vidura was a great and pure devotee of the Lord, and therefore his questions to His Grace Rishi Maitreya must have been very purposeful, on the highest level, and approved by learned circles. Purport: Questions and answers among different classes of men have different value. Inquiries by mercantile men in a business exchange cannot be expected to be highly purposeful in spiritual values. Question and answers by different classes of men can be guessed by the caliber of the persons concerned. In Bhagavad Gita, the discussion was between Lord Sri Krishna and Arjuna, the Supreme Person and the Supreme Devotee, respectively. The Lord admitted Arjuna to be his devotee and friend, Bhagavad Gita 4.3. And therefore, any sane man can guess that the discussion was on the topic of Bhakti Yoga system. Actually, the whole Bhagavad Gita is based on the principle of Bhakti Yoga. There is a difference between karma and karma yoga. Karma is regulated action for the enjoyment of the fruit by the performer. But karma yoga is action performed by the devotee for the satisfaction of the Lord. Karma yoga is based on bhakti or pleasing the Lord, whereas karma is based on pleasing the senses of the performer himself. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, one is advised to approach a bona fide spiritual master when one is actually inclined to question from an elevated level of spiritual understanding. A common man who has no interest in spiritual values has no need to approach a spiritual master, just as a matter of following fashion. As a student, Maharaj Parikshit was serious about learning the science of God, and Sukadev Goswami was a bona fide spiritual master in the transcendental science. Both of them knew that the topics discussed by Vidura and Rishi Maitreya were elevated, and thus Maharaj Parikshit was very interested in learning from the bona fide spiritual master. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. I seek blessings of all the superior assembled here and good wishes of all the friends and well-wishers. So translation once more. Saint Vidura was a great and pure devotee of the Lord, and therefore his questions to His Grace Rishi Maitreya must have been very purposeful, on the highest level, and approved by learned circles. So it seems like there is a number of chapters in Bhagavatam which are just like questions and answers. Actually, if we consider it, the whole Bhagavatam is like a series of questions and answers. And there is a small book which says perfect questions and perfect answers. So many of the essential questions are there in that book. But it's natural, like in a discussion, even when two people are discussing, they would have some questions on that subject. So here we can remember how Srimad Bhagavatam actually happened. Parikshit Maharaj, he approached Sukadev Goswami, and there was a series of questions and answers. And actually, this canto is leading, Sukadev Goswami is answering all the questions, gradually progressing through different cantos, all the questions Parikshit Maharaj has asked. So questions are also of great importance. Actually, Vaisheshika Prabhu says, questions are like hooks. You can use it like a hook and get the conversation rolling. So if someone is really intelligent, they can ask a smart question and take the conversation to a totally higher level. But people who are not so intelligent, they will ask like not so purposeful, not so meaningful questions, and it just like brings the conversation totally to a different level. Actually, Sukadev Goswami, he congratulated Parikshit Maharaj for the quality of questions he had asked, and he like actually quoted, like spoke few verses, just like appreciating Parikshit for asking the right questions. and before he started answering. So in this one also we see Vidura, he approached Maitreya Muni, and they will have a discussion and they will cover so many topics. But like Srila Prabhupada, he gives example of mercantile men. So it depends on the quality of people involved in the discussion. Based on that, one can determine what kind of questions could be raised in such a discussion. And interestingly enough, Srila Prabhupada, he gives example of discussion, conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, bringing us back to the Bhagavad Gita. So there is a very beautiful words. I would like to just read this one. Sanjaya, the secretary of Dhritarashtra, who was kind of informing him what's going on the battlefield, he actually says that just hearing Krishna and Arjuna speak, he was experiencing like great transcendental symptoms. This is what exactly he said in his own words. Yeah. Sanjaya said, thus have I heard the conversation of two great souls, Krishna and Arjuna, and so wonderful is that message that my hair is standing on end. So this is like actually a whole series of 4 or 5 verses where Sanjaya is actually taking the opportunity to glorify the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. Samvad. So this is the Samvad between Vidura and Maitreya Muni that we will be reading in this verse. Before that, in the previous verse, it's also important the place where the discussion is being held. The place is also important. Like if you go to some cinema hall, there will be other topics being discussed. But if someone come to the Bhagavad Gita museum, there will be different topics being discussed. So the place is also important, and therefore it's interesting. Parikshit Maharaj, he actually asked Sukadeva Goswami, what is the place where this meeting happened? So I was reading some of the verses in this chapter. This discussion actually happened at the banks of Yamuna. So it doesn't say specifically, but I would say in Vrindavan, Mathura area. Maybe there is a bit more specific description later somewhere in the canto if someone has been reading recently. But just looking at this chapter, that's what it said, that it was at the banks of the Yamuna, because that's where Vidura, he first met Uddhava. And in this chapter, actually, we will hear questions of Vidura to Uddhava. Because first, when he met Uddhava, he didn't just like start telling him, how his travels are going, or if he had any difficulty or this or that. But he actually started asking about welfare of the Yadus, of the Pandavas, and of Lord Krishna, like that. So there is this whole chapter, it actually has so many verses just talking about that. And a person who is not so spiritually trained, they would start talking about themselves, start glorifying themselves, and then maybe if they are done with that, they might ask, oh, how are things going with you or some other people that may be commonly known. But here we see it's like a whole different mood, how the how to ask, what's the proper way of asking questions, because the way they are asked, it creates a certain mood. Like sometimes someone may ask a challenging question, and then it totally changes the whole mood of the discussion. Um, Even Srila Prabhupada, he had sometimes people would ask challenging questions, but um, a spiritually advanced person, they are not disturbed by it, but it it does create a different kind of energy, a different kind of mood in the whole space. And so we should be we should consider asking questions before, because many times people, just for the sake of asking a question, they would put certain question, and it may not even be related to the subject. Many times I've heard like some devotees, they would say, okay, now if anyone has question related to this topic, we can discuss. Because sometimes people would ask questions like totally off the topic, and it just like changes the whole mood of the discussion. So yeah, this is very important point Srila Prabhupada mentions here about discussion between Krishna and Arjuna, because we are going to celebrate the Bhagavad Gita Jayanti. That's on 12th of December. And it's a really good time to start meditating on the Bhagavad Gita and have plans how we can increase the glorification of the Bhagavad Gita. So I thought it's very nice to read some of these verses here. Also, another point that's mentioned in the purport here is like about asking the question to the right person, so the bona fide spiritual master. Now we know the famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Tadvidi pranipatena priparsnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshina. So who we should ask question? Someone who is tattva darshina, who is a self-realized person, because that kind of person, they can satisfy our inquiries to complete satisfaction. And not only that, just by hearing that, we can have similar experience. That's what Sanjay is saying. Just by hearing this conversation, his hairs are standing on end. Like, how many times do we hear conversations where we have experience like this? So, but it also depends on the mood and the consciousness of the person putting up the questions. Like Sanjaya, he, in the next verse, he actually says how he was able to have such an experience. So I'll just read the translation. This is what he says. By the mercy of Vyas, I have heard these most confidential talks directly from the master of all mysticism, Krishna, who was speaking personally to Arjuna. So Sanjaya is not saying that he's such a great person, this or that. He has such an advanced consciousness. Because of that, he's able to, see all these hear all these mystic conversations, and he can communicate it to blind King Dhritarashtra. But he's actually telling him that this is how I'm able to have access to such mystic conversations between Krishna and Arjuna. And Sanjaya was sitting in the palace by the king Dhritarashtra. So it's like he wasn't even on the same place. So when I was in India, I went to this pilgrimage site where actually Vyasadeva, he had his ashram, Badrik ashram. It's become like a popular tourist spot these days. Many people from Delhi and nearby, when it gets like super hot in the months of June and July in Delhi, then they go for vacation there because it's like still some ice around. So they go to cool down at Badrik ashram. It's become like a holiday spot now. But we can see it used to be like such a place for practicing austerities, performing like advanced devotional service. Actually, that's the place where Krishna, he recommended Uddhava to go and meet other devotees and practice bhakti over there in their association. He personally recommended Uddhava to go there. And of course, he sent a message for the devotees there through Uddhava. So he also gave him like a special service to go and share his message with the devotees there, because Krishna personally couldn't go to Badrik ashram. So he was like, Uddhava, you please do this service for me. And it's actually, since we are talking about this, it's actually mentioned like those who are in proper spiritually advanced consciousness, they can actually see personalities like Uddhava, Narada in Badrik ashram even now. But someone who go with a holiday mood just to cool down from the Delhi heat, they not necessarily gonna see Uddhava and Narada Muni there. So they may see some ice and buildings and other things, but they're not gonna see personalities like Uddhava over there. So the point to understand is that how we can come to such consciousness where we can have access to these amazing pastimes that are eternally going on actually. So that's what Sanjaya is saying here. By the mercy of Vyasadeva. So we have to receive the mercy of the bona fide spiritual master. And only then one can have access to such transcendental pastimes. Otherwise, our consciousness will be just like these mercantile businessmen that Prabhupada is giving example here, and the topics that we will be discussing will be those kind of topics too. It's actually called prajalpa in Sanskrit. So it's like our duty to make sure what kind of conversations, what kind of topics we are engaging in, because there is also another thing called the Vak Siddhi, and it's also austerity of speech, which is mentioned in chapter 17, and that's text, I think it's text 15. So let me just find out really. It says that one should speak in a very pleasing way and still be able to deliver the essence. So pure devotees, they can do that. They can speak in like a straightforward way. They can give the truth, but still in an attractive way. That's what we hear, like Sukadeva Goswami, Narada Muni sometimes, that famous analogy of King Puranjana, he gives, and he's telling the king directly. And later the king realizes, oh, it seems like you are talking about me. So just by hearing that, we get so many deep realizations. But yeah, that's the verse. Anudvega karam vakyam satyam priya hitam chayat swadhyaya bhyasanam cheva vanmayam tapu uchyate. So vakmayam, of the voice. So we should be careful how we speak, because the sound has power. That's why we chant the mantra Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So it's one can actually, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that being silent doesn't mean that you don't say anything. Being actual silence means that you speak purposeful things. You speak about Krishna, speak about topics that can help elevate others. And then we will develop this Vak Siddhi, power of speech. I heard in one recording, some devotees was mentioning about Srila Prabhupada that he had this Vak Siddhi. On few occasions it was very clear. He said something and it actually happened. So one time Srila Prabhupada was speaking in London, and after the discussion he asks some of the devotees, did you see Narada Muni was here? And devotees were like, what? Narada Muni was here? And then Srila Prabhupada said, actually, we should have a asan, a Vyasasan for Narada Muni here. And then they did that. I haven't been there, but I just heard this. Just by hearing, I was like, wow. So we can, remember the fortune we have by hearing these purports of Srila Prabhupada, because he's such a personality to whom, when he's speaking, such great personalities like Narada Muni, they can come to such discussions. So we have such great fortune, and we should take advantage of this, especially reading the books, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. I just want to mention one point, because what happens when one hears with proper mood, proper consciousness, even though our consciousness may not be pretty good or wherever it is, but if we hear with a proper mood, not with like a mood to challenge, but actually with a mood to learn and to give service, then we can experience this. This is what the sages of Naimisharanya, they were saying to Sutta Goswami. We never tire of hearing the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is glorified by hymns and prayers. Those who have developed a taste for transcendental relationships with him relish hearing of his pastimes at every moment. If someone is interested, this is verse 1:19. It's a very famous verse, also quoted quite often. Vayam tuna vitripyama uttama shloka vikrame yashranvatam rasagyanam swadu swadu pade pade. So this is how we can see where our taste is. Are we tasting the transcendental pastimes, or are we tasting some other pastimes? That's one exercise everyone can do for themselves, and that's how we see ourselves. Where are we heading? What direction? We should take this opportunity to remember, whenever we ask a question, maybe do this as an exercise. Whenever you are asking a question, just remember, is this question for other person's benefit? Is it going to help anyone benefit by hearing this question? Is it going to help them become elevated hearing that question? Is it going to lead our discussion to a higher level, or is it going to bring both of us down? But an easy way to do is, we don't even have to make up questions. We just have to study these books, Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, because all the questions are already there and all the answers are also there. So if we just study them, then we have all the questions and answers, and we can just use those questions and answers. And that's what we are doing here. We're just discussing them, and we experience certain pleasure depending on our consciousness. But just by hearing this, we can develop these higher tastes. So I would just leave it with that use the questions to your advantage. Use them as hooks. Don't use them as not hooks. Use them as hooks so they help you get a result. Actually, it's a technique that many famous speakers, business owners, they all use this to get a proper answer from the person. Like, even if you want someone to do something, you have to ask them in a certain way so they are happy to agree with you. But if you ask in an improper way, they might just go away. So, this is what I take personally, that use the questions as hooks, use them for benefit of other people and also for our own benefit, and better use questions that can help elevate us. So I'll stop here. It's almost time, but seems like Ananda Kirtan, he has a burning comment or question you want to share?
Well, I just grabbed this just in case someone wanted to ask.
Okay.
But I have one if nobody has
one. Yeah, go for it, bro.
You're talking about how different, questions and what we speak has an impact on the way we think and our consciousness. So just my observation, I was wondering maybe if you can give some advice. Some devotees, they may watch television or movies or things like that, or listen to mundane music on the radio. Is that, I'm thinking they're doing that because they're not experiencing a higher taste in devotional service. Otherwise, why would you want to do that? You should utilize all your energy in reading and doing service and everything like that. So what would you recommend for those individuals? Is it a question of sincerity? Are those people lacking a certain level of sincerity? And if they were very sincere, they wouldn't be doing those things? Or what if they are sincere, but it became a habit and, they're listening to radio music or whatever it may be? Do you have any suggestions for those devotees to get out of that habit? Or does that make sense?
Yeah. So I don't know if everyone could hear him well, but his question is that someone may be practicing devotional service, but still they may have inclination to watch some movie or hear some TV programs or something that is not necessarily spiritual in nature. So what's the reason for that happening? I can remember this analogy Srila Prabhupada gave, that when there is a fan going around and you turn off the switch, then the fan still keeps going round and round for a little bit longer before it comes to a stop. So someone may have taken to devotional service and started practicing, but they may still have previous habits, material habits, things they are attracted to. So they may take some time. It's not like as soon as you start chanting Hare Krishna, all the bad habits just vanish. But we can see our own example, and we can see so many other devotees before coming to Krishna consciousness. They were not necessarily studying Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam or hearing spiritual topics. But as soon as they start practicing, especially after coming in association of devotees, it becomes so much more easier to give up bad habits and become more serious in our practice. So my suggestion would be to get association of devotees who have taste for say reading or having discussions on these topics, because when we have association of devotees, then this bad association will naturally be replaced. You won't have time for other associations. But this actually happens when we don't associate with devotees. Then what else are you associating with? What's your association? So Savas Prabhu has wanna say something, and then.
Thank you for a wonderful class. On that particular point, I think that in the purport, Prabhupada describes as two different kind of karma. There's karma for sense gratification, and then one for pleasing Krishna. And for us as devotees, if we really develop a desire just to please Krishna or the predecessor acharyas, you won't have to talk about TV programs or movies or anything of that nature. Because if we're really absorbed, we're chanting our japa very nicely, we're always asking that question. We should be asking that question. What can I do for my Guru Maharaj today? What can I do to spread Krishna consciousness? What can I do to please Rukmini Dwakadish? If we're focused on those things, no one will want to be around you that is thinking about mundane things. They'll scatter real quickly. So for us as devotees, maybe we should really consider sincerely that when we're chanting and we're reading and we're associating, that conversations be focused on serving Krishna and pleasing Rukmini Dwakadish or pleasing Srila Prabhupada. And I think that'll help considerably.
Yeah, it can't get better than that. Actually, like you said, there is in the 7th canto, it's mentioned, like when one is pure, then all the activities of their bodily necessities, they are naturally happening. Like Prahlad Maharaj's example is given, and it's because he's engaged in Krishna karma. So in the 7th canto, it's mentioned about Prahlad Maharaj. So there is Krishna karma, means everything exclusively done for pleasure of Krishna. So when one does that, then they don't worry about their bodily necessities, this or that. They are naturally taken care. But when we are not doing that, then there will be worry, anxiety, this and that. So many things will come with all that, and I'll distract us. So that was a very good point Savas Prabhu mentioned, that we should remember this, that who are we trying to please? If we just keep this one question in our mind all the time, I'm trying to do this, but who am I trying to please by doing this? Yes, bro.
Prabhupada also, I read this in a lecture book, and Prabhupada said that hearing and chanting also means doing service. In other words, when you're serving Krishna, if you're in the serving kitchen, cooking or doing plates or washing on the altar, that is actually hearing and chanting. So hearing and chanting is just not sitting and reading a book or just talking, but hearing and chanting also refers to service that you're doing for Krishna directly, and that is part of hearing and chanting. So I just heard that. I just read that. So it was very interesting how Prabhupada described that, because if you're doing something for Krishna, you're hearing about Krishna, and you're thinking of Krishna, and you're chanting of Krishna. Like when the devotees were coming together in Gundicha temple, they were all washing the Gundicha temple, but they were all chanting Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. So they were hearing and chanting.
Yeah.
At the same time, cleaning the
practical
temple,
service,
water and scrubbing and sweeping and associating in that. So that's also hearing and chanting. So if we do service together, we're hearing and chanting about Krishna, and it's purifying.
Yes.
Whatever part of the temple you may be in, on the altar, in the temple room, in the kitchen, on book distribution, Harinam, associating in the ashram, this is all hearing and chanting, and that's what Krishna consciousness is about, for that purification.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah. Actually, attentive chanting will naturally lead to practical service. Because once you have chanted attentive rounds, you would naturally have a desire, I want to do some service now. Practical service, because that is also needed, especially in the beginning stages when we are in stage of purification, clearing our consciousness, anartha nivriti. Unless we become completely pure, we cannot really just sit and chant or sit and read. So many times it's seen someone stays back just to read for 6 hours, but then you read for 2 hours and then you go in a different zone. It's called the Yoga Nidra zone. So, yeah. So, one should be intelligent enough to see if it's good to also time to time. I heard Shivram Maharaj, he mentioned this, that say like on special days like Janmashtami, Ekadasi, you can use all the time, chant 64 rounds, chant all 24 hours if you can, or read all day. But one cannot do that every day. It's like actually imitating the acharyas. Even Srila Prabhupada, if we actually following him, we can see even on his deathbed he was translating Bhagavatam. So what more can we see? It's very important to do practical service also. But yeah, to build up strength. If we want to just like chant or read all day, then we should do in good association, especially in association of someone more advanced than us. So that ways it will help us grow. Otherwise, if we're just doing it on our own and there is no one kind of saying if it's helping us or not helping us, or are we just like being lazy, then what's the advantage of doing that? Because the whole idea is to develop taste. But if what we are doing, it's not helping us develop higher taste, then it's just a waste of energy, waste of time and effort. Yes, sir.
I think this is verse from Bhagavad Gita. Then is it in Bhagavad Gita? Then you have to, in the same time, you have to know about nations and science and nations. In a sense, then in material world, so many things is going on, and if you know some of things what's going on, you can use in Krishna service. They're like Bhajanandi, Goshtanandi. Okay, somebody who is Bhajanandi is completely focused on Krishna. So my question is, basically, this is the highest, to just think as much as possible about Krishna, Krishna's pastimes, and everything else is not so much important. So is it that highest stage of consciousness, or you can use some things what's going on in the material world, because everything comes from Krishna anyway. So if you know some things, what's going on, like pandemic, whatever, but in a sense you can use in Krishna's service, in preaching. Some scientists, they're preaching, devotee scientists, so they have to know different things. So is it real still highest things actually completely focus on Krishna's pastimes and, everything Krishna take care about?
So what's your question?
But my question is this highest actually stage of Krishna consciousness, then you actually just focus on Krishna, directly Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's name, and everything else is not so much important? According to this verse from, I think, Bhagavad Gita, it's good to, in the same time, it's good to know, like nations, and I think it's from Shisha Upanishad, I'm not pretty sure anyway.
Okay. Yeah, of course, like Krishna talks about all different energies. In chapter 7, there are a few verses, he explains different energies, and then there are other places also. And then he talks about the Mahatmas, what do the Mahatmas take shelter of? They take off the divine energy, the divine potency. So that's how we see. But we have to also follow our acharya, what our acharyas are doing, our gurus are teaching us. We have to follow their orders, their instructions, and only that will help us get to more advanced stages. So to answer, yes, we have to understand both the energies, material energy, spiritual energy. That's what Srila Prabhupada was showing. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhi. So we have to engage everything in service to Krishna. But at the same time, we have to see we don't get distracted by doing that. The whole point is to develop higher Krishna consciousness. So yeah, as long as if you see that's it's leading in that direction, then that's pretty good. That's will help grow. So okay, I'll stop here. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.